Welcome to the second installment of this year's January Education Month presentation. The theme this year is History of Boston Restaurants, and today we are exploring Eastern Standard and how it came to be and has evolved over the last 12 and a half years or so. So who in this room, I want to hear you by your applause, has worked at Eastern Standard in the last 12 and a half years? Who here has had an incredible meal at Eastern Standard in the last 12 and a half years? That's incredible. We have four esteemed panelists with us today. I'm going to give you a quick intro and then we're going to dive right in. Immediately to my left is Ryan Mulholland. Ryan hired me as a hostess back in 2006. He worked at ES until 2012 and then moved to Philadelphia to open Vernick Food and Drink as the general manager. To Ryan's left, we have Beth Cannon. Beth was an opening Eastern Standard bartender and is the one who literally taught me everything that I know about cheese. She has the pleasure of overseeing me as a reckless hostess, room service attendant, breakfast server, and food runner for quite some time. Next to Beth, we have someone hopefully you all know, Mr. Garrett Harker. As you know, he is the owner of Eastern Standard, as well as partner in the Hawthorne, Branch Line, Row 34, Island Creek, and Les Sablons. To Garrett's left, we have Andrew Holden. Andrew has been at ES since 2006. He's partner of my very favorite restaurant in Watertown, Branch Line. Just a few months ago, after 11 and a half years, Andrew bestowed the title of general manager to Caroline Markham and moved into a partnership with Garrett at Eastern Standard.
Jamie Bissonette, here to talk about my Austrian grandmother.
Yeah. Jamie was unable to make it due to weather. He is stuck in New York, and Andrew very graciously stepped in for him. Thank you. I think that we need a little context to kind of what the dining landscape looked like in Boston in 2004, 2005, as Garrett was getting ready to open Eastern Standard. Beth, can you help us paint a picture of what the dining scene looked like at that time?
It was really chef-driven. Ken Oringer, Michael Schlau, Barbara Lynch were kind of the heavy hitters, and that was where you went to eat for sure. It was a very chef-driven, very competitive kind of finer dining. But then casually, there was still a lot of dive bars. Silvertone was like absolutely instrumental in the city. But it was a little competitive and pretty proprietary. Recipes weren't handed out, working for people were secret. Everything was kind of kept tight and close to the chest between restaurants. It was really interesting when Eastern Standard opened, and that was kind of a huge deviation from that mentality.
Ryan, what did Kenmore Square look like at that time?
I was a student at BU, and I very specifically remember taking the train from Warren Towers to Newbury Street because I didn't want to walk through Kenmore Square. There was, it was dirty. There was rundown brownstones and row homes.
Garrett, you want to tell us a little bit about how you landed in Kenmore Square, how you chose the space?
Sure, yeah. The story starts with those two gentlemen, Pete Guiney's father, Terry Guiney, and then Frank Keefe, who Ryan mentioned. Just for background on Frank, he's part of a little boys club that gets together every Thursday for lunch. When Eastern Standard opened, that became their spot. Before Eastern Standard, it was Number 9 Park. Before Number 9 Park, it was Maison Robert, a legendary restaurant in Beacon Hill, right around the corner from Number 9. So for years, Frank, as part of a group of real civic movers and shakers, would have this lunch. When Maison Robert, after a incredibly long run, closed, they moved it to Number 9, and Frank became one of my regulars. Number 9, I was the GM for 6 years or so. And Frank became just part of the family. And he was one of the first people when I actually decided to leave Number 9 and B&G. I caught Frank, I remember vividly, outside of Number 9 Park, and I said, Frank, I decided to leave. I'm going to pursue some other opportunity, future, opportunity to be determined. And he said, what are you doing later this afternoon? I said, I'm free, I'm wide open. And he came and picked me up, and he brought me and walked me through the space that was Eastern Standard. So you never know who's in front of you and what doors they might open. I'll just say for context, in terms of the neighborhood, I always sort of attribute the opportunity to the fact that I didn't grow up in Boston. If you're a local like Andrew, some of you, Kenmore Square was just so imprinted on your sort of psyche that you could never imagine people coming out to eat and drink there, gathering there. It was just, I had never spent any time in Kenmore other than like walking through it to go to a Red Sox game. So but when I looked on a map and saw where it was located and then took into account that Boston University, the hospitals, the Red Sox were such sort of landmark influencers in the square, I think that was, I was just stupid enough to take a chance on a neighborhood that was really kind of, it was a challenge in the beginning.
I remember Garrett saying that some of his dearest regulars at number 9 would pull him aside after he said and they said, Garrett, you're making a huge mistake, go anywhere but Kenmore Square. No one will eat there.
Yeah, we had a vision. We knew we wanted to do a boutique-style craft cocktail bar in the midst of a 200-seat restaurant. But I think, the important sort of lesson there is that we didn't sort of bite off more than we could chew. We started with 6 cocktails, and once we knew we could nail that, then things blossomed. And at times there's been 48 or 50 cocktails on the cocktail list. Sure. So unfortunately, Jamie Bissonette, who some of you may know, who was the opening chef of Eastern Standard, he couldn't make it. He is stuck in New York. He's partners with Ken Oranger. They have Copa, Toro, New York, Little Donkey. So he was in New York last night and couldn't make it out today. Yeah, the opening menu was, we landed on the brasserie, the idea of a brasserie. I remember Frank and Terry, they had gone to New York at some stage in the planning of the hotel and the retail and the restaurants. They'd gone to New York and they'd eaten at Balthazar. And there's a certain thing that happens when you walk out of Balthazar that it's a very dangerous kind of disease that can happen, where you walk out and you think, that looks easy. We can pull that off. So I think there have been a lot of restaurateurs that have been like, I'm going to do Cleveland's Balthazar. I'm going to do San Antonio's Balthazar. And Frank and Terry were like, let's do Boston's Balthazar. Jamie and I, in discussions about the opening menu, we were like, we need to claim some territory outside of France for our own. Who knows where it'll go, but I was like, what about Austria? What do you know about Austria? And we were like, I don't know, nothing. A bunch of white people live there. I was like, all right, well, let's dig into Austria a little bit. So, it was a small thing, but, we opened with the veal schnitzel. Jamie had the spätzle. We had, we had this idea where we could do, that sort of freed us to be able to do New England-inspired brasserie food. And so it became a little bit a part of the identity. I remember in some of the early press talking with, and saying, well, Jamie was really influenced by his Austrian grandmother, and we would reference the Austrian grandmother, sort of get inspiration from her, what kind of recipe she was doing in Jamie's childhood. And we were like 9 months in when I looked at Jamie. I said, did you have an Austrian grandmother? He said, no, you made that up.
I thought that was true until last night.
He was like, no, and but that sort of gave us the freedom on the menu. Jamie can't say enough about, I think the real testament to Jamie was he put his heart into a grilled cheese, the same way he put his heart into beef Wellington, which was the opening Saturday night plot. He was a real democratic chef.
And Andrew, you experienced Eastern Standard at first as a guest. What was it like coming down here in the early days?
Yeah, I had about 6 months before I started talking to Garrett about getting involved. And I said last night that Beth was probably 90% of the reason I fell in love with the restaurant, because I was living on the block. It was, pretty grungy at the time. I worked at Clio, which is now Uni in the Elliott Hotel, and I started coming down to eat at 9 o'clock on Monday nights and would sit with Beth, and there'd be Marble Bar on either side of me, as far as, a couple other people here and there. It wasn't necessarily busy on the weeknights, and I didn't want to like the restaurant at first. I was so programmed and very fine dining, and back to what the city was like then, there were not a lot, as Beth said earlier, restaurants had white linen, or there was a dive bar. There was nothing sort of in between, and it sort of just, won me over.
Ryan, when you came down here, this was your first management position, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What did the management team look like at that time, and what was service like, culture like?
So it was a kind of a small crew when you consider what the management team grew into in the 6 years or 5.5 years I was here. To, I think Andrew jokes that there's 17 managers. I don't know how many there really are, but
No, it's 17.
17. What were we doing?
And we trained you for a whole 3 days?
Yeah.
Wow. You must have been a slow
That's,
learner.
I was standing at the bottom of the stairs by the barista station on that double header, thinking to myself, I can walk back up those stairs, down the hallway, out the front door, back to Clio, and they'll take me back. I had that fight or flight response. But it was a tight team of people that were working really, really hard. But it was, people that had the right mindset of take care of the guests for, whatever it might be. You're fighting for the guest in every single circumstance. And I think that it worked, and I believe it worked really, really well. I can't help but thinking about the dichotomy of the dining scene that Beth brought up with the, white tablecloth and dive bar. And something that people started to really love about Eastern Standard was, because we didn't only cater to one demographic of people, you could look down the bar and see, a businessman sitting next to a kid with tattoos and earplugs, and they would never really, for any purpose, be talking to each other, except for the fact that they're both eating foie gras and they're both loving it. And we were able to kind of bridge this gap of class in the city, and I think really change the dining scene in a lot of ways. And that was largely due to, Andrew pushing the envelope of take care of every guest, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what your expectation is, and also a lot of how we approached who we hired as staff, that they were able to have that mindset, to put that effort in, and also to surprise people. We were talking last night about our staff had tattoos. It was okay. And it caught people off guard sometimes because they thought they were going to a fine dining restaurant. And I feel like I'm going off topic. One of my favorite moments, we had this server, Chrissy Neithercott, if anybody worked with Chrissy. I remember looking over at her and seeing her go up to a table of businessmen with literally earrings from here all the way down. It was like armor, all the way down both of her ears, and tattoos all over her arms. And I could see these guys just be like, what are we getting yourselves into here? And then they asked her about a Burgundy, and she dropped a knowledge bomb on them, and they were all right in her hand, whatever she wanted, they trusted her. And it was kind of the expectation swing was something that was a really effective tool for us in a lot of ways.
The restaurant is staffed 24 hours a day. There's never a moment when there's not an employee in the restaurant. And we said, wait, we've got a cook on the line who's here, and we've got guests at the bar. And it wasn't the specials on the mirror, it was just, why don't we serve the menu till 1:30 in the morning every day? And other than Franklin Cafe or Chinatown, that was a huge, there was not a lot of places you could go get good food in a good setting with good energy at 1 in the morning.
I think I still get chills when I see you all writing the specials up on the mirror. I don't know if it moves anyone else the same way, but it's just such an iconic kind of image to me. that's what happens at Eastern Standard depending on the day of the week, but like at midnight, one of the servers gets up and writes the specials. And just as a lesson, that was an idea that was, it was original, that we were not, I didn't read it in a magazine somewhere. And it was really born out of just trying to solve for a frustrating kind of situation. But it's a little bit of a lesson, like look around in your restaurants and there's something right in front of you that you just can't see. It goes back to the beginning, Beth, if you remember the mirror at Eastern Standard, we were going to do the sort of Balthazar move and write all the booze offerings up on the mirror. And we tried it a couple of times, but it just never looked right. The writing went like that way, And we ended up just, like the day that we opened, we erased it. And that mirror sat there. And Andrew and I were standing by table 35 at the front door one Saturday night. And all the kids were coming in, and they were, round of Patron shots and asking for just goofy drinks. And, and it was busy, but it was just it didn't feel, and I standing there with Andrew, and I was like, dude, we didn't open a nightclub. This is a restaurant. Like, if we're gonna endure, the nightclub kids will move on in 6 months and go find the next spot. Like, we need to be here for a long time. I was like, look at that mirror. Like, why don't we get somebody up there to write food, get food back in the focus of what we're doing? And I think we did it that night. I think
Just jumped right up.
I think Colleen Hine got up there that night and just started writing made up specials up there. And that's happened every day for for the last 10 years or so. And it's just, again, it's like such a simple sort of manual, analog kind of solution to something, which can sometimes be the best solutions, Beth.
Was anyone drinking rosé in Boston prior to 2005?
Very few.
Very few.
Kat always had maybe 2 rosés at, B&G. I don't think there was one rosé when I was at Clea. There was pretty non-existent, 1 or 2 glasses here or there, but rosé wine was not really a thing.
What year did we go with, I think there was an argument last night over whether the first year it was 7 rosés by the glass or 9 rosés by the glass, but when did that happen?
I don't remember the exact year, but we were kicking around putting 2 or 3 on, and Garrett just kind of had this moment where he kind of said, F it, we are gonna pour 9 rosés by the glass. And it was like, what? 9 rosés, it's like, look at that patio. Let's just do it and blow it out. And the rosé thing just, was as much for an internal staff, getting staff to buy in on something and learn about something. And we were all in it together of well, this is the Austrian, it's got higher acidity. This is the softer Cab Franc. And that just was one thing that just kept table-sided, and it just took off.
It seems so normal now, but I just remember walking out to the patio and seeing some big sweaty guy in a Veritech jersey drinking a glass of rosé and thinking, this is cool.
We have arrived.
Yeah, we're doing something here.
Well, we talked about Easton George Zimmerman early on, super early on. But any other worthy, notable experiences?
I could take a couple more hours with this, but we always believe, I think in all of the restaurants in the group, that this is not a transactional experience, and we're looking for moments to put ourselves out there and have our lives, merge with guests. And communications professor at BU ended up marrying Colleen and myself. Our accountant and other regulars were at our wedding. Joyce Lonergan, the regular with the most visits, who was about to have her 800th seated meal, texts me all day long with 12 emojis after every line she writes.
She's had 739
739, sorry.
Yeah.
She means every emoji.
She does.
Yeah,
She's really smiling from here.
I thought it was, I don't know how you felt, Rye, but when Sheffield said that the idea was to treat even new guests like regulars, that was a really important part of ES. It was sort of like, hey, what if somebody just walked in and you said, welcome back, and took a chance that what would happen? Well, really what happens is that person plays along with, people love the connection. So if you could do that do it with conviction and with passion, that be this sort of open-armed kind of thing. I love our regulars, and we could talk long, but I would say while I'm up here, there are 4 people still involved in Harkertown from the opening crew. I think, I'm gonna go out on a limb, I think it's 4. Anybody have any idea who those 4 people are that go back to the very beginning of Eastern Standard?
Yeah, Jenny Delgado.
Rafa. Rafa's prepped the steak tartare for 13 years. Like, there's a reason why the steak tartare is the best in the city and so consistent, So, and almost everyone that's come up and through the kitchen from the prep and dish has some connection to Rafa. Who else? Jenny Delgado, not here right now, right? Is Jenny still traveling? Jenny Delgado was an opening server at Eastern Standard. Jackson Cannon. There's one more. He works at Island Creek, Boston. Jorge.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jorge Munatan, the shucker at Island Creek, maybe the best shucker in the Eastern Seaboard, was the original oyster shucker at Eastern Standard. So there's 4 that have stayed.
I know so much has changed. It has to have, but it doesn't feel that way. Yeah. It's like a homecoming. I lived there. You open a place, you just, it's blood, sweat, and tears all the time. So every nook and cranny of that space has a memory for me that's so deeply embedded into me in a cellular, like even the sconces. We sat down today for breakfast, and like the sconces at the table, and I had deep feelings about the sconces. Like from back in the, I'd look out from the bar and see the sconces, and they'd all be crooked. And I'd be like, those sconces, will someone put the seams to the back, or I'm gonna lose my mind. You feel, you live there. We worked a lot of hours.
I'm going to finish up with some stats. Caroline pulled some info for me. So you can pull a guest report in Open Table, and Caroline pulled a report for the number of guests that had had 300 plus reservations, and it's 2 pages long. Marion Harris has had 820 recorded visits to Eastern Standard. We mentioned Joyce earlier, 739. Barton Carter and Miriam Carter, 2 of my favorites, have 358 visits. And David Oswald, another one of my favorites, has had 340 visits. So there's lots of other names on these lists. It's pretty cool. In 12 and a half years, I have a product mix in front of me. Okay, so let's say in the last 10 years, Eastern Standard has sold over 100,000 Bud Lights.
What?
Well, yeah, 101,071 Bud Lights in 10 years. The highest selling item that we have on here is the fried calamari at 145,037. Eastern Standard has sold 115,400 whiskey smashes.
Lemon.
And no longer
mint.
on the menu either, right?
Took it off the menu, and the sales didn't change.
And the tea strainer.
Yeah.
T-Stars.
Exactly. Thanks, John Kurtz.
The thing that I found most interesting was we sold more Cabernet by the glass than Pinot Noir, but highest selling glass pour was Sauvignon Blanc with 108,399.
Baked rigatoni?
Baked Riga, 75,897.
Everyone perfect.
Thank you all so much for being here. Please join us next week, 12 p.m. in the Commonwealth Room.